In today's video, we're gonna be going over the Moonstone, the first tea cake that we have got commissioned. We're gonna go over the backstory of the cake, the recommended number of steeps, what types of pots to use for it, and much, much more. My name is Dardalange from 2023's Teaware. On this channel, we do teaware education, tea reviews, and then podcasts with professionals in the industry around tea. So let's get started with the backstory. Derek has been sourcing from Zhang for probably 4 or 5 years now, and he lives in Fuding, which is in Fujian province in China. Now, if you know anything about the history of white tea, you'll know that this is the origin place from the old story of Taimu and Taimu Shan. One thing to note when talking about shoumei is the difference between green and brown shoumei. The difference between these two is green shoumei is the most natural, brown is a darkened version of the leaf in processing to make the tea look like it's older. The Moonstone is a green shoumei, and Zhang was the person who told Derek 4 years ago that brown shoumeis don't age as well as green. At first we were a little bit skeptical, but after a few years, Derek drank it, tested it, and proved that Zhang was in fact correct. And those green shoumeis have more character, they're more developed, and they deepen in flavor compared to the brown. Another thing to note about shoumei is a picking grade of white tea in Fuding. In fact, it's what I end up drinking most of the time because it's more raw than the white peony or the silver needle. It just has a more earthy texture to it. The last two things on the backstory are the size and the fact that it's pressed. So we wanted to go with a 100-gram cake because a 100-gram cake is just the perfect amount for tasting and trying to see if you like a new tea. A lot of times tea companies will do 25 or 50-gram samples, but that's really only enough time for a couple sessions. Whereas the 100-gram gives you anywhere from 10 to 20 sessions, giving you enough time to help you determine if you really like that tea. And then finally, the character changes when it's pressed. When the heat is added, it changes the flavor and gets into the earthier notes from the more vegetal notes that you have with an unpressed shoumei that's only a year old. This helps it give a little bit more character and taste more similar to an aged shoumei, but also makes it better for storing if you do want to age it. Loose shoumei is one of the biggest tea leaves if you get it in a bag, but having this nice 100-gram cake, you can condense the size by, I don't know, 5 to 10 times. Now that we have a little bit about the background of this tea, let's get into 8 different characteristics that we went through to help give you a better idea of what this tea is going to taste like and what the experience is going to be like. First off, we have the look of the dry and wet leaves. As you'd expect with a young shoumei, there is a lot of green in this cake. Now, this is actually the easiest way to tell if a shoumei was actually aged or if it was forced aged or made to look brown. There should be a lot of contrast between the leaves. Even in an older shoumei, you should have dark and light browns, whereas with this, we have the light greens and the dark browns. When you're looking at the wet leaves, you'll see a lot more of the green than the brown. These leaves are big and thick with a huge amount of variance in the color. So how many steeps can you expect to get out of this? In our test, 9 seemed to be the magic number where you get the most amount of flavor and a nice little bell curve with a slight push closer to the beginning. Steeps 1 and 2 are just warming up, but you do start to get that lingering mouthfeel even after the second steep. The full body and flavor are gonna come in steeps 3 to 5, then in steeps 6, 7, 8, and 9, it starts to taper off. Now, that's not the same for the liqueur though. As we start, the first couple steeps are very light, similar to a barley or a diluted apple juice. As we progress through, we get into that thick golden color that we expect from a shoumei. Now, the only difference between this and an aged tea is the color isn't necessarily as reflective of the body. For a younger shoumei, it doesn't thicken quite as much as it will as this tea ages, which makes it great for storing. Speaking of thickness, in the beginning, this tea is very, very light and mild, closer to a green tea, and then as the steeps get rolling, it starts to thicken up into a beautiful medium-bodied tea. Shoumei is one of my absolute favorite teas to sit and smell the lid. The aroma and blend of the clay and the tea is just a really, really nice pairing. You get the smell of rainforest underbrush mixed with this sweet bark that is absolutely amazing. Pair that with the heated clay and you get an absolutely beautiful aroma, whether sniffing from the gaiwan or smelling the lid directly. One thing that's really nice about white tea compared to green tea or a pu'er, for example, is it's pretty much impossible to over steep it. If you death brew it, let's say you leave the leaves in for 5 minutes right off the boil with a really, really heavy potent amount, it's just gonna get slightly thicker and get a little bit more body out of it. But again, remember, if you do death brew, you are taking away from future steeps. So you really have to make that decision of, do you want a long journey or do you want to get that compact, punchy flavor all in one? Because it doesn't oversteep, it also does make shoumei really, really nice for Western brewing. If you want to just toss it in the stainless steel thermos, you can do that, and the leaves are big enough that they won't come out of the top either, which can't be said for green or red teas. Honestly, I feel like that's one of the most annoying thing about green and red teas. Like when you have those really small buds and you're just like trying to spit them out. Anyway, this tea is priced at 18 cents per gram, which is one of the cheapest prices you're going to find in high-grade loose leaf tea. Part of that is because you can use more leaves for this type of tea than you can for silver needle or white peony. And the second part is white tea isn't as popular as the other types of tea. Green and red tea have been around for a long time. Pu'er's found this new popularity in the last 20 years, and white tea is both kind of overhyped and underhyped at the same time. What I mean by that is now you'll often hear people attributing white tea to many health benefits, but at the same time, most people aren't drinking white tea just for its flavor, which is really sad because it is such an earthy, delicious tea. Next, we have the recommended pot pairing. Since this is a white tea and you do lose out on that sweetness if you keep it too hot, we're gonna shy away from chaozhou and yixing and look more at qinzhou or jianshui. The Don't Make Waves or soon to be released hot cocoa are two great options. Don't Make Waves being better for groups and the hot cocoa being better for solo sessions. In terms of value, shoumei is really interesting because in Fuding they have very specific requirements and regulations for their white tea, which gets passed down to all of the grades. But because there's such a large amount of variance in the picking of the leaves, it helps to lower the price. The same thing because of the lack of popularity in shoumei versus other teas. So it's one of the cheapest teas you can get, but not one of the lowest quality. And so shoumei is one of the best values that you can get in loose leaf specialized teas. In addition to the price, shoumei gives you a great baseline for the different flavors of white tea. I often come back to it when I'm looking at higher grades of white tea in Fuding, and then comparing it to some interesting different white teas down in Yunnan or in Japan as well. The Moonstone is the reflection of one of the most classic types of white tea. Whether you drink it fresh or you age a plethora of it in your collection, it's never going to go bad. If you want to try a tea that's completely the opposite, the modern hub of tea in China just over the last 20 years, check out my review right here for the 2023 Tilt Shift, a bud heavy tea from Yunnan province that's curated by White 2 Tea.